paranormal pals, and welcome to the Secret Society of the Spooky Sisterhood podcast. My name is Melanie, and I'm the HGIC, the head ghoul in charge. If you've stumbled into our headquarters here, our Not So Secret Society is a community built through social media to connect like-minded individuals who are paranormal enthusiasts. And our goal is to lift up those in this space, especially but not exclusively women, who traditionally haven't had that opportunity. We hold events both live and virtually. We offer a bi-weekly blog. We run a Patreon with additional spooky perks, and lots more to come like this podcast. Each week, we'll be joined by a member of our sisterhood, our special guests, or both, as we discuss one of many fascinating topics in the paranormal, or what I like to call the spooky adjacent space. Our hope is that our podcast will have a little something for everyone. So without further ado, let's call this meeting to order. Seeing as how this is our first episode, we don't really have any business to share with you other than to say welcome to all of you who are listening. We're so excited to finally be doing this, and we're so happy you're here. This week, we're joined by someone who I could not be more stoked to talk to. This person is someone who I really enjoy their content, their writing, their knowledge, and their conversation. We have with us the brilliant Alex Matsuo. Alex is a paranormal researcher, social media influencer, and author. She's the founder of the Association of Paranormal Study and runs The Spooky Stuff. If it's weird, spooky, unusual, scary, macabre, or haunted, she wants to write and talk about it. Currently, she has over 140,000 followers on TikTok, and y'all, that is barely scratching the surface. Alex has participated in some of our spooky shenanigans in the past, and I am dying to welcome her, so let's bring her in, shall we? So, Alex, I told everyone a little bit about you, but is there anything else that you would like us to know about you?
Ooh, that's a good question. At the end of the day, I work a regular day job by day, and then after I'm done with work, I'm doing spooky stuff. So, whether that's research, going to the local cemetery, finding a new haunted hotspot, it's a weird, delightful little balance I have.
I like how you put that, a weird, delightful little balance. I think that probably a lot of us can relate to that, to be honest with you. So can you set the scene for us a little bit and tell us, where'd you grow up, and was there any sort of paranormal in your life when you were a kid, in your household, in your community?
Oh yeah, so that's a great question. I always love talking about my origin story. So I grew up in San Diego, California. So I was a California baby. Grew up next to the beach, and really, it was starting around age like I want to say 7 or 8. That was when I had like my first notable experience. Not in California, but in Appalachia, Kentucky. My grandmother is from Appalachia, and every summer we would go visit her family. And I know anyone who's familiar with Appalachia or grew up in Appalachia are like, yep.
Yep.
So my first paranormal experience being there, it makes sense.
That'll do
And
it.
right, right. And I actually grew up with a lot of Appalachian folklore. I just didn't know that it was Appalachian folklore. At least I didn't really understand until I hit my 20s, and there was more awareness about I had some awareness of folklore, but it was through like the theater lens, and then learning
Mm.
like, oh wait, these are actually things like people believe in. And then growing up, looking back at my childhood, especially just growing up with my grandmother, it was like, oh wow, she instilled a lot of these Appalachian customs and folklore into me, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So it's like if you hear whistling in the woods, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
You close all your curtains, everything at night. You don't open them up, and yeah, just a lot of the folklore. It's like, or if you think you hear your mom calling you in the forest, no, you didn't. It's very much like, and I honestly thought it was because of like the moonshine business, but apparently, there's
Mm.
some thicker lore behind that.
Maybe
So
both.
yeah, maybe both, because that's how my grandmother's family got through the Great Depression was uh, making bathtub whiskey and gin and all that stuff for
Wow.
the um, adjacent to the Hatfields and McCoys, but not quite Hatfields and McCoys. Um, but
Amazing.
But yeah, so after that, it seemed like that first experience really just kind of opened things up, and I started having, I want to say, like, low threshold experiences. Like another one was seeing a ballet dancer stretching on the banister in the theater I was in.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
we were doing a show, so the company that I was doing the show with had the theater booked. So for a ballerina to be stretching on the banister when she wasn't part of the company, that's something that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And plus she disappeared right in front of me. So
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
you know. Um, yeah, so I kept having like little moments like those, where I would see something and I'm like, did I actually see that? I'm not sure, where you kind of question yourself.
Yeah.
But the big experience that happened was I was in a really, really bad car accident, and I actually ended up falling 25 feet off of a freeway ramp.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to go to the hospital,
A little bit.
just a little bit, just check up, make sure I'm okay.
Yeah.
Um, but my accident had happened on New Year's Eve in San Diego, and it was raining. So, San Diegans, Southern Californians, I love y'all. I grew up with y'all, but you can't drive in the rain. So, so there was a lot of accidents that night. And plus, you add the
Mm.
layer of New Year's Eve and
Oh
all these other
yeah.
things. So the hospitals were packed. They actually couldn't even take me to the nearest hospital because the hospitals were so full.
Oh my gosh.
So where I ended up, again, because the hospitals were packed, we ended up sharing trauma rooms. And I was sharing a trauma room with this gentleman who sadly did not make it. Now, while I was having this whole experience in the trauma room with him next to me, I also had what I believe to be an out of body experience. Not necessarily a near death experience. I didn't see the light, but
Mm.
I could see all my surroundings. And I also saw him also out of his body too. Like it's like we were both watching each other on the edge of the bed of our beds,
Oh my
respective beds.
gosh. I have
Yeah.
chills.
Yeah, so it was it was wild. And then the next day, or not even the next day, it actually literally that evening, because they had to do an MRI and a CAT scan on me and all these tests, but I started seeing a shadow in my room, and then I actually ended up seeing this gentleman in my room very briefly. And keep in mind that I was 19 years old. I really didn't know any better, and so I thought the guy was just there to say hi or to check up on me because,
Yeah.
well, it turned out, like I said, I didn't realize he didn't make it until maybe a day or two later, but I had been seeing him in my room, so you can imagine the shock that I felt when
Yeah.
realizing he didn't make it. He ended up, long story short, he ended up attaching himself to me for about 8 months. Now, could it have been me processing survivor's guilt or
Mm.
processing my trauma from the accident? I I do entertain that, quite possibly. The only thing is my mother also experienced weirdness too, in not only the hospital room but also in the house. She never actually
Wow.
saw him, but she could feel him around. So that's the only
Wow.
thing that I have to hold on to, that maybe there was something that happened,
Yeah.
or my mind was just that powerful and I was doing the whole Carrie thing at the end of, in the Stephen King book and movie, but I don't think my mind was that keen. Um,
Not yet, at least. There's
not
still
yet.
time.
There was still time. Yeah, so that was the big experience that really opened me up to um, wanting to help people with these situations. My
Mm.
accident happened in 2005, going into 2006. The paranormal community was very different, if not completely non existent back then, or at least
Yeah.
not existent on the level of visibility we have it now. Because, like Facebook, I mean, I could throw a rock outside and I'll probably hit a ghost hunter,
Yeah.
So they're everywhere now.
Hmm.
Had this happened now, I could have just put out a Facebook post and I would have probably gotten so much help and so many resources. Back
Yeah.
in 2006, the TV show Ghost Hunters was maybe a year or two old. There was really nothing. And we ended up getting help from the Greek Orthodox Church. And even then, it was like help, but not quite help. Um,
Interesting.
it was basically they did the woman who came over from the church, she did this whole like evil eye ritual to confirm whether or not there was a spirit present, and then once there was a spirit present, she basically just handed me an industrial sized spray bottle of holy water, which is really something you want to get from a religious authority.
Especially that it's a spray bottle. It's not like
It's a
you're
spray
sprinkling it.
bottle.
It just
It's not.
needs to be showered everywhere.
It was literally like, it was like probably to like to my chest up to like my forehead. That's how big this thing
Oh
was.
my
It
gosh.
was like, it was huge. And so to get that from a religious authority, it was like, okay, this is really comforting.
Right.
Not. So, he did end up moving on eventually. But yeah, no, that was an experience that really struck me. And yeah, it had turned into just me wanting to be a resource to my community and in a non-judgmental context.
Hmm.
And then I just started diving deeper into like parapsychology. I started taking classes from like the Rhine, when I could, watching videos, like research videos. I mean, I always had an interest in the paranormal growing up
Hmm.
too. Some of my earliest books that I read were actually like Ed and Lorraine Warren books, and
Oh,
because that was
really?
what was available. Yeah, The Demonologist by Gerald Butler, Gerard Butler, Brittle, not Gerard Butler. Oh my God,
Gerard Butler.
you could see who I have on my brain.
I was
Um,
gonna say I would love to
Gerald,
read that book.
I think his name was Gerald Brittle who wrote that. Anyway, let's just take a moment to appreciate Gerard Butler. All right. Um, just take a moment. I don't know why. That's really funny. But yeah, so that was really all I had access to because it was like school library or public library. My mom didn't like spooky stuff in the house. I can
Hmm.
see why now she didn't. I mean, after
Yeah.
that whole experience, I mean, it's valid. Um, she's like, I just don't want it in the house. But yeah, so and really that was like the start of it. I started my team officially in 2011 while I was in San Diego. So we've
Okay.
been going for about 14 years now, which is wild to think about.
Yeah. It's
It's
wild to think that was 14 years ago.
yeah, that's a whole other a little, if we want to have an existential crisis, this is the time to have it.
Right.
2011 was 14 years ago. But
Woof.
yeah, so yeah, that's really where it began, and then I've just been doing the research, and I used to be more active in paranormal investigating, but day job and being an adult, I haven't been able to as much, but I'd like to get back out there, pretty soon, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But yeah, just writing books and doing all that stuff.
Well, you actually just kind of answered my next question. And I did want to also comment on the investigation bit of that because that's a whole chunk of questions I've got for you later. But I completely understand that feeling of not being able to take the time to go investigate as much as you'd like because there are so many responsibilities that come with being a grown up and having those day jobs. And I actually, believe it or not, have never been on an investigation. I've
Oh,
kind of done a couple very casually on my own, but I've never been on an investigation. And every time I see one that comes up in my area, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. So as you can imagine, there's uh, different events and
oh
investigations that
yeah.
happen all the time. But it's always at a time that I can't go, or it ends up being something that's pricey. And sometimes I think that that can be a real obstacle for people to be able to participate as well. But um, I was wondering before we move on, do you feel like it's different in San Diego than it is out here on the East Coast in terms of the accessibility or the interest that people have in the paranormal?
Back when I was living there, yes, they're like the paranormal landscape in Southern California was more folklore based and legends and very
Mm,
much untouched. Like paranormal tourism hadn't really come into the scene yet. Whereas on the East Coast, I actually ended up going to the East Coast a lot just to do investigating because there was more
mm,
haunted locations, more ghost tours, and it seemed like the East Coast was a little bit ahead of the West Coast. These days, I think San Diego, I think they've caught up a bit,
okay.
but there's still a couple of haunted locations that are that could be accessible from like I guess a investigation standpoint, but
Mm,
um it's also, culturally it's a different area too, People aren't
Yeah.
necessarily making their money from ghosts. It's, other things.
The
So,
beach, for example.
yeah, the beach. Yeah, I mean, because when people go to San Diego, they're not thinking, oh, I want to go to like something like Waverly Hills or
Yeah.
Gettysburg. It's like
Right.
we're going to the beach, we're going Comic-Con, we're doing all these other
Right.
things. So it's not like it's the paranormal is usually not people's first inclination. When they think San Diego. So
That's true. I usually honestly think of the zoo or that
yep,
it's a military town, essentially.
it is.
Those are
It,
the
it
things I think of, not ghosts normally.
And actually, the military was how my family ended up in San Diego too.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
It's interesting to me, too, how tied together the paranormal and military can be, because obviously there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of big emotional moments that happen, not necessarily even all bad, but there's a lot going on, and I think
Yeah.
that triggers a lot of paranormal activity in some ways. And I don't know that I've heard a lot of stories that come from like active military bases, but I can't imagine that they don't happen. Like they've got to be.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. So I started my team in 2011 in San Diego. Majority of my team was military. It
Oh,
was
okay.
just me and one wife of one of the team members, military wife. She was a Marine wife. We were the only civilians on the team. So my team actually was made up of mostly Marines and one sailor. And
Interesting.
yeah, very interesting. And actually a lot of our cases were, believe it or not, at Camp Pendleton.
Really? Okay. So
Mhm.
we're going to have a whole other conversation about
Mhm.
this one, I think, because I have so many questions. My my parents weren't military, but my grandparents were. And so I definitely have some experience and knowledge around bases, but definitely not on that level. And it sounds like you really got a front row seat. So I cannot wait, honestly, to have a little more conversation about that later. But I am curious how it sounds like you kind of jumped into the paranormal world because you were thrust into it, having these experiences. What made you kind of take the route of doing the more educational research and stuff as compared to just going out and yelling at ghosts in abandoned houses and stuff?
Yeah, so I I thought about like how I wanted to go about the space. And honestly, I think a lot of that is me coming from the generation of ghost hunters when they were debunked first and
Yes.
less entertainment. Um but also getting exposed to like the Rhine and actually mostly Lloyd Auerbach, seeing how because his whole moniker is like Professor Paranormal. Like he has an
Hmm.
MS in parapsychology when one the university he was going to actually offered that, and just seeing like smart people are into this. Ghost Adventures had not come out yet, so this was like pre Ghost Adventures. So I think just seeing that like academics were interested in this, and I mean I went to grad school. I have my MA in theater,
Hmm.
but I did really have a respect for academia, and I wanted to be a professor for the longest time, and yeah, you see where ended up. Um, but yeah, so I had a reverence for academia, and in grad school, I was doing a lot of research from an anthropological aspect. I didn't.
Mm.
I wish I had kept my second major in anthropology because anthropology and theater just kind of meshed. But
Yeah.
I was part of my thesis was actually exploring the expression of paranormal beliefs through theater. Um,
How cool.
so how basically how did we express our belief in the paranormal and ghost stories and whatnot? And theater is pretty much the original vehicle for that. Well, oral tradition, but
Yeah.
theater is one of the original ways that we told ghost stories and expressed ghost stories and expressed our own beliefs in the paranormal. So, so I really wanted to stay on that track. Ghost Hunters kind of got my foot in the door of like, oh, people can look at this with a scientific eye, but I was looking at it more from a sociological eye. I've
Hmm.
tried to do the science side. I just talk to the scientists instead because they're way smarter than me. I just say, hey, can you listen to this? Or hey, can you look at this? Let me know what you think. Um, but yeah, so And then I started taking some classes from people, very smart people, university educated, who were offering those classes as well. And
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, so there is a route to do this in a way where and plus, being in theater and working in the entertainment industry, and I lived in LA very briefly, I had a hard time accepting paranormal entertainment as well because I'm like, I
Yeah,
know how reality shows work, and it really, and I still struggle with paranormal entertainment in that aspect just because, especially now since being on several shows, it's
right.
like I kind of know how this works, and
Yeah.
it's hard
Once
to
you see
trust
how the
it.
sausage is made, it's hard to go back.
Well, yeah, and then I struggle with like the reverence some people have for some celebrities. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some really nice TV personalities. They're very kind, very gracious, but then there's others who I feel are clutching to their fame as much as possible, but they do it at
Hmm.
the expense of others, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but I also
Yeah,
understand they have to pay bills. But yeah, anyway.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We all got to pay our bills some way. And my dog's feet are not selling well on OnlyFans, so I don't know what
Oh
I'm going to do,
no.
but so the way that actually I was introduced to your like world on social media was through some videos that you made about paranormal history. And the reason that I was hoping that you'd join us today is because you were talking about a topic that is obviously near and dear to our hearts with the Spooky Sisterhood, kind of the reason that this whole thing exists at all, which is women in the paranormal. So I know that's something that you know a lot about, you speak about often. I know we could do an entire podcast series on this topic, but for today, I was wondering if you could give us a little 101 lesson, like who are some of the folks we should be familiar with? Where should we start with all of this? Because women have been around in the paranormal for a lot longer than we think. You were mentioning, watching a lot of these shows, it's easy to see there's a lot of men that are front and center. And it's, I think, sometimes hard to remember that there's also a lot of women involved in this space. So, do you have a place where you would start if you went back to the beginning?
Yeah, so this is something that is often, I love talking about women with the paranormal, but it's also become controversial because some people get very upset when you talk about who even possibly the first ghost hunter was.
Hmm.
And as a starting point, I always recommend people check out Catherine Crowe. She is a 19th century author. She was a playwright as well. She was born in the late 1700s, but she
Hmm.
passed in the 1800s. Her, I'm trying to learn more about her. There was a gentleman who started a biography about her, but then abandoned the project like decades ago. So I'm
Oh,
trying to pick
no.
up the mantle and work on that. Yeah, but she was somebody. She was married. She escaped an abusive marriage, fled to Edinburgh with her son, and then started writing books and plays to make ends meet. But she also had an interest in phrenology, which is like early psychology. It's bunk
Hmm.
now, but it's basically you studying the crevices and the bumps of the
Oh,
skull to determine mental illness,
interesting.
which is back then is revolutionary. But she was also an avid researcher, and she also was a translator. She translated a text by Justinus Kerner called The Seeress of Prevost, which was a case study of this woman named Frederica Hoff, who
Hmm.
was a kind of like a medium, really. I mean, her story reminds me a lot of like Annalise Michael's story.
Mm.
She was having premonitions and speaking in prophecies, but also very, very sick. So Catherine Crowe translated that text, and then she started diving into the world of the paranormal. So she actually wrote a revolutionary book called The
Hmm.
Night Side of Nature, which if we look at it today, she describes a lot of the phenomena like ESP,
Mm.
psychokinesis, poltergeist, doppelganger, crisis apparitions. She was actually the one who coined the words poltergeist and doppelganger into English usage. She didn't invent the words, but she adapted them for English usage.
Wow.
And she had collected all of that research just by through her own work, interviewing people and whatnot. And then and this book actually ended up being a huge success. It went through 16 print runs,
Wow.
which is amazing.
Right.
Um,
Especially for her time.
Yes, and she did not take on a pen name, a male sounding pen name. She was Catherine Crowe or Mrs. Crowe, although she had already divorced her husband back. I think they divorced. She definitely ran from him. She was definitely single from him. But yeah, so she got praise from even Charles Dickens. And this was right like the same year the spiritualism movement was becoming huge in America, but it
Okay.
took about a year for spiritualism to get to the UK. So the night side of nature and spiritualism were all kind of born in the same year. But yeah,
What
so
a
she
year.
really, I know, right? 1848 was a good year for the spooky stuff. Yeah, so she revolutionized and set herself as like the authority when it came to like paranormal research. And I will always say that she is the first ghost hunter, because some people will say, "Well, what about exorcists?" And I'm like, "They're not ghost hunting. They're not paranormal investigating.
Right.
That's something completely different."
Hmm.
Um, and I don't even count like early psychic readings either as like paranormal investigating. That's just doing a reading.
Right.
She was the first one to do the scientific method, and she was doing what mirrors the closest to what we do today. And this was back in the 1800s.
Wow.
Um, and I have yet to find anyone who's doing stuff earlier than her. So for now,
For
until I
now.
find someone in an earlier time period, she is the first ghost hunter in my opinion. And plus her work did lay down the framework or the foundation for the Society for Psychical Research.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so she even though SPR started after she passed, she helped set the foundation for it without even realizing it. Um, so I definitely recommend people start with Catherine Crowe. That's
She's a
the OG.
legend. Yeah.
She really is, and there's a lot of people now who are telling her story, which I'm thrilled about. When I wrote Women of the Paranormal, part of the call to action at the end of the book was, please take this information, blog about it, make a podcast about it,
Yeah.
speak about them. Like please, I don't own their histories. Nobody owns their histories, but if we don't tell these stories, or if someone wants to take ownership of
Yes.
their stories and keep it to themselves, or just make or gatekeep it so that they're the only ones that could speak it, these stories are going to fade into obscurity. So
Absolutely.
I tell people, please talk about them. Do the work.
If people stop telling the stories, then you're just kind of gone. And
Yep.
these women, and I'm going to ask hopefully for some other women that you would suggest that we look at some more, but we don't want to lose those stories because we don't want all of their hard work to be for naught.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there someone that you would say kind of picked up where she left off? Or is there, other women throughout the years that you feel are really significant in the way that the paranormal industry has kind of progressed?
Oh, absolutely. I would say definitely Eleanor Sidgwick. She was one of the co-founders of SPR. She founded SPR, co-founded it with her husband and basically his Cambridge buddies. I think it's Cambridge. Someone correct me if I'm incorrect on that. Um,
I'm
Pretty
sure they
sure it's
will.
Cambridge. I'm pretty sure it's Cambridge. But I don't have my notes in front of me. This is why I'm guessing. But yeah, so Eleanor Sidgwick. I would also say Louisa Rhine. She was married to J.B. Rhine, who started the Rhine Research Laboratory at Duke, and then it became the Rhine Research Center when they broke off.
Mm,
Thelma Moss. She ran the parapsychology lab at UCLA. She actually oversaw the work of Carrie Gaynor and Barry Taff, who oversaw the entity case
yeah.
with Doris Bither. Um, there's so many. I mean, Sybil Leek. Sybil Leek is kind of a
Mm,
legend in my eyes.
yeah.
There's some really interesting spiritualist mediums too, who kind of leveraged the spiritualism movement to amplify their own voices.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was one medium, and of course, her name is escaping me right now. She's got a very unique name, but she spoke about abolitionism, but she only did it when she was channeling a man, and she was speaking as this man to spread the word of abolitionism, which I find hilarious.
And I'm sitting here because I know that story and I cannot
Oh,
remember her name.
Oxa Sprague. That's what it was. Oxa Sprague.
Amazing.
Again, a very unique name. This is why it
It
wasn't like I
is.
was trying to remember like Mary Brown. It's like
Right.
Oxa White. I think it's Oxa White Spread. Yeah. Sprague. Yeah. So, but that was quite common. There was another, Cora L.V. Scott was another one
Mm.
who, um, she was actually one of her, oh my gosh, wow, I'm really great for words tonight. One of their like main, like, 'cause a lot of these spiritualist mediums, they had like a main spirit that they would channel.
Right.
What is the word? What is the word for it? But Cora L.V. Scott's like one of her, I'm gonna say persona right now because that's the best word I can think of,
Yeah.
was a doctor, and people would actually go to her, and she was like 13, 14 years old, prescribing antibiotics and treating sickness and doing it well, but
Which is
channeling as this
scary.
doctor, which is scary. But then it's like, well, was she really channeling a doctor? I mean, maybe. But
It'd be
so
hard to prove it, I guess.
it
Either
would
way.
be. It would be. But yeah, so let's see. I mentioned Thelma Moss. There's a lot of really good ones. Shafika Karagula, she was actually George Norrie's aunt, believe it or not,
Okay.
and she really helped inspire George Norrie in what he does now, which I think is really cool. His aunt Shafika, that's how he referred to her.
No big
Um,
deal.
yeah, no biggie. So there's so many out there. I'll mention some of the ones that are going to be in volume two. Sybil Leek is one of them. Rosalie Norton, my mentor Robert Pyatt Bellamy, she was a cryptozoologist, also
Mm.
paranormal investigator, but she was mostly a cryptozoologist. Um, yeah, so there's a lot. Even Marie Laveau,
Yeah.
you know, sh how whoever Marie Laveau was, whether she was a persona or a name or an actual person, I do dive into all of that in volume two. She was very influential in her time.
Absolutely.
I also found a lot of really interesting gems for Volume 2, like a couple of women who actually started a spiritualism society for Jewish women.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we got some Jewish mysticism coming in Volume 2.
Can't
Um,
wait.
a lot of witches and astrologers this time around too. And I did include a couple of mediums who were very known to be fraudulent, but their stories are so curious, and I think they did make an impact in a way of like,
Yeah.
hey, SPR, you need to come check this out and get better at, debunking.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really good ones in volume 2 that I'm really excited about, but there's so many out there. I mean, I
Oh,
started the
yeah.
project with just 12 women, and then volume 1 became 38. Volume 2 is probably going to be like 42 because I am going to try to even out the numbers a little bit, but there's going to be
Okay.
at least 40 in volume 2. So there's a lot,
Wow.
and it's not like, oh, Jane Smith was a ghost hunter who liked to go to haunted places. It's not even like anything like that. It's like, oh no, this person set the groundwork for this
Yeah.
realm of study, you know?
They're all
So,
trailblazers in some way
yes,
or significant in some way.
yes, yes.
Wow, that was going to be my next question was do you feel like there's any in particular that were, significant in some way? But I mean, obviously, and I have your book right here.
Yay!
And obviously there's like you said 38. I
Yeah, there's
didn't count,
38.
but yeah. And there's they're all really remarkable people and they have such remarkable stories. And I know the fact that you have another 40 women, you didn't even need to say that you're not just throwing people in there to throw them in there. All of these women have such great stories, and I know that they must have something remarkable for you to want
Mm-hmm.
to include them in this second volume as well. Is there anyone in this new volume that you're like particularly excited to tell us about?
Yes, I am going to. pull them up. I have
Because
so I
there's
have
quite a
so
few.
many.
Yeah.
There's so many. I think the one I'm really, really, really excited about it might be Toni Wolff.
Mm,
She was actually Carl Jung's contemporary. I think Carl Jung may have mentored her for a little bit. They did have a little bit of a relationship, um,
it happens.
which is fine. But when I was looking up her research and her notes, a lot of like the work that she did heavily influenced Jung, and if not Jung, completely pulling from Toni Wolff and putting
Wow.
it into his work. And I'm
Interesting.
like, this is so did Young lie? I'm kind of sitting here like, excuse me, um, which happened quite a few times
Yes.
as I was reading all about all these women. Um, another one,
I feel like
I
that happened a lot just in history in general. There were so many women who were doing all of this really remarkable work, and then someone in their life would steal that information and they'd steal their ideas and they'd run
yep,
with it, and then they become a legend for it. And, I'm so glad that you're telling these stories of these women and really letting people know who was there and who put in the work.
yep, exactly. And the other one I'm really really excited about is Victoria Woodhull. She
Mm,
was the first woman to run for president,
yeah.
like officially the first woman to run for president. Um,
Fascinating story.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, and hers, because I also include her sister Tenny in there too, because Tenny was also doing the spiritualism medium thing, but she and Tenny were also the first female stockbrokers
Yeah.
too. I mean, they had some help from Vanderbilt, but still, I mean, they were wearing power suits, they were breaking the glass ceiling in all
Yeah.
sorts of ways, and and Victoria still used her voice, in the spiritualism aspect too, but used it for like helping women gain the right to vote. I mean, she was running for president before women had the right to vote.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Incredible.
it's incredible. And also her story is just, I gosh, I read her story and sometimes I just cackle because it's just so good. It's so good. I mean, I feel like I would have wanted to be besties with Victoria Woodhull.
Absolutely.
She also advocated the free love movement.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've seen the political cartoon of her where she kind
Yes.
of looks like Maleficent, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I need that on a mug. I need that
Right.
on a shirt. I need that on a
Tattoo.
coaster tattooed. Like it's just so like it's so good because it's like free love was such a threat at that time, and
She
I'm
was an
just
absolute nightmare for a lot of people,
oh my
probably.
gosh. Oh, she probably was, So, but she's another one I'm really excited to tell her story to, and yeah, there's some really good ones in this next volume. And it's interesting because why didn't I put them in volume one? Well, a lot of it was because I needed to either research more, like I wanted to make sure like I could tell their stories properly,
Mm.
or I ran into them after volume one came out, and I'm like, well, I gotta tell their story too.
Yeah.
So,
Do you feel like you're still finding people all the time?
hmm
I love that.
yeah. So I have one big outline, like one huge outline, and it's broken up right now by like volume one and volume two and volume three and volume four. That's why
Oh,
I
wow.
said before we started, like I know I have at least two more volumes.
It's
Um,
there.
it's there, like it's absolutely there, and sometimes what happens is I write their chapter and then I'm like, well, I don't know if it's gonna fit within like the theme or the flow. There's not
Yeah.
really a theme, but it's like if I have too many parapsychologists or I have a lot of psychics, like this round I had a lot of psychic mediums and a lot of fraudulent
Mm.
psychic mediums,
Yeah.
and it was going to turn the book into something I didn't want it to turn into, so
Right.
I took several out. So there will probably be spread out between three and four.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I try to, so there's no theme really, but there is a strategy where I'm trying to keep it all balanced. But yeah, no, I mean, I keep finding more because when I'm reading these papers and I look at like their references or who co-authored or who reviewed, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that name sounds feminine. I should look that up. And it's like, oh, there's another woman. Oh, she helped Harry Price in the Borley Rectory. I'm like, okay, I got to add her too,
Oh my gosh. That's honestly, that makes my heart so happy because we don't hear about these stories a lot. We hear about Harry Price.
Mhm.
I love this. So that kind of leads me to my next question, which I think, There's obviously some really clear answers to this, but I'm curious from all your research if you have any, insight that maybe we don't have on this. What are some challenges that you think women in general face in this space, either historically have faced or currently face or both? And has it changed at all, do you think?
That's a heavy one because there's there's a quite a few even between volume 1 and volume 2 where some of these women, because I mentioned Toni Wolf, but also when you think of volume 1, in volume 1 there's Rose Mackenberg in the book. She was Harry Houdini's right-hand person.
Hmm.
She was his main secret agent, and she was also the one who kept the torch alive with his legacy after he died. But
Yeah.
you don't hear a lot about Rose Mackenberg, or Mac as she was known as. Um, and that's unfortunate, but Harry Houdini is like the face, he's the talent, whereas,
Mhm.
Rose Mackenberg was the one doing all the research for him and passing it on, and then he was up there doing it on stage. And
Yeah.
she did manage to find her own footing after he passed, which I was happy to see. Like she did find some identity and some fame of her own,
Hmm.
not nearly at the level of Harry Houdini, but it was there. And actually, anytime I've heard people say that the people who were attacking spiritualism were mainly men and men attacking women, I'm like, oh wait, hold on. Let me tell you about Rose Mackenberg.
Receipts.
Yeah, exactly. And that frustrates me too because the debunkers are often credited to be the men, which I think is displaying a patriarchal hierarchy in there. Um, which is incorrect. And I tell people, and very well-meaning people trying to elevate women, but I'm like, hey, if you ignore Rose Mackenberg's story, you're not really exercising feminism here or boosting visibility of women's work. You got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
But yeah, but then you have Toni Wolf, and then you have Sybil Leek, and you have oh my gosh, there's so many. I'm trying to think. Like Aleister Crowley actually had a lot of female contemporaries,
Right.
but you don't hear about them because they weren't, Aleister Crowley. Like Dion Fortune, that's she was a contemporary of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah. What a
But
great name.
yeah, I know. It was her pagan witchy name.
Oh.
There's quite a few. There's some really good ones. Um, but yeah, so I think a lot of it does come from the patriarchy. I hate to be like the patriarchy, grr, but it's but
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 yeah.
it is true. For centuries, if not couple of millennia, women have been in this role of being subservient to men, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Like, because strong, independent women were scary, especially in the
Hmm.
19th century. Like, oh, woman not getting married right away, or it's like I'm an old maid by the time I'm 21. You know,
Right.
um, I think a lot of it comes from that, but also and there is a little bit of science behind, especially the entertainment business. I remember I was in one of my theater classes in college, and we had this whole discussion of like, because it happens in multiple communities, and in theater, I'm like, there's so many really good roles out there for men, and good and great songs in the musical
Yeah.
theater sense for men, but you don't see that nearly as much for women. And apparently, there's been studies done. I can't quote you a specific one, but I just remember this as my professor was talking about it, that audiences as a whole resonate more with men. Both men and women audience members seem to resonate more with men, like male leads.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's interesting. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, oftentimes we've been raised to think like, oh, a strong, independent woman could like she's asserting herself, but then she might be a B, she might be a
Right.
capital B. She's advocating for herself. Oh, she's difficult to work with. But if a man does it, then it's like, oh, he's so sure and determined and
Right.
confident.
What
So
an
I think
expert.
what an expert. And then if a woman does it, it's like, oh, she's such a know-it-all.
Right.
um, so to me, that assertion makes sense that people resonate with male leads or male characters more, which would explain that the TV show situation where
Yeah.
we mainly have men in these starring roles. And we don't really have any shows right now where it's a woman at the forefront.
Hmm.
Um, because even like Ghost Hunters, the women are still on the side. The
Yeah,
show Repossessed had two women and one male in the cast, but the male was the star of the show and the two women were
absolutely.
supporting. So, and but even Kindred Spirits, Amy and Adam, they're very much they're equals. That's probably the closest that we've gotten.
Yeah.
Um,
And she
but
had to work a long time to get to that place as
yep,
well.
and she did. Um, so we still don't have that, at least not in that kind of sense with like a serious researcher. Because Katrina Weidman, same thing. It's she was
Yeah.
with Jack Osborne and Nick Groff. Um, we got almost a little bit close with Conjuring Kesha, but I didn't.
Ugh.
The only thing I didn't really like about that show, I watched it because I wanted to support it. I wanted to
Yes.
support it, but it was almost like it was meant to be portrayed as a hot mess. Um, just a lot of like I don't know.
Yeah.
There was just a lot of moments I was like, ah, man.
It was close. Like
It
I
was
kept
close.
watching it and I was waiting for them to make a joke of her or for her to make a joke of her experience. And I did really appreciate that she seemed to be super into it and really taking
Yes.
her job seriously. And I really actually enjoyed a lot of that. I kind of felt like by bringing in the celebrities to like
Mhm.
investigate with her, it became more of like a, oh, hey, buddy, let's go look at this haunted house and scare each other and less
Yeah,
like
yeah.
actual serious. But I agree with you that I felt like it was so close to being something that could have been so good and it just kind of didn't hit the mark because I think they wanted to really market on the Kesha is a weirdo, like
Yes.
dingbat kind of gal, which she's not a
No.
dingbat by any means. But I do think that they tried to capitalize on that look instead of really letting her shine in this space
Yeah.
that she seems to really enjoy.
I agree. I agree. It's almost like the Paris Hilton effect, as I like to call it, because Paris Hilton for the longest time when she was on these TV shows, like, oh, that's hot. Just this like ditzy heiress rich girl, like she
Yeah.
literally talked with a vocal fry, like this. But then it's like she's one of the smartest business women like out there right now, and her voice is completely different.
Yeah,
And I was like, you know what, I can respect the hustle.
absolutely. I gotta
she,
give her that.
she totally like leaned into the stereotype and banked on it. So
Absolutely.
I have to respect that. I just want somebody to invest the money, take the risk, and do almost like this is going to sound worse than the way I'm intending it, but I want a female equivalent of Ghost Adventures.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe a little less screamy,
Yeah.
um, or at least early. Like, I want to say season 1 and 2 of Ghost Adventures. I want a female equivalent of that because I will say I did like the first several seasons of Ghost Adventures.
Yeah,
I really liked it. Especially the original documentary, I loved it. Um,
definitely.
I just want somebody, if there's some rich person, rich producer out there, I just want you to take a risk, just take a
Yeah.
risk, and I just want to see what happens with it. Now there was a Canadian show with all women that came
Mm.
out a year or two ago. Sam Baltrusis had them at his Mass Paracon event, and I can't remember the show to save my life
Oh,
right now.
great.
But then the cast was really solid there, but I don't think it got anywhere further than the first season.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know, just something. Or if like Zach could use his privilege to like bring in a female into the cast and just kind of like almost do like a handoff, and that's like the spin-off right there. Like I don't know,
Yeah,
just a little something
that'd be
like
great.
that would be excellent. Or yeah, I would love it. I would actually love it if Zach brought on a woman who just took none of his ish
Yes,
and like kept him in and put him back in line like throughout the show. I would totally watch the show again.
absolutely. 1,000%. They need something to freshen it up. That's the exact right way to go.
It's like just like a female skeptic who's just like, Zach, shut up.
That's the pipes, dumbass.
Exactly.
I
You're
mean,
not possessed. You need some chocolate and a cookie, and you need to be in the corner. Like just
right. It's snack time and nap time, and then we'll come back and start again.
it's it's like Aaron, just go into the basement. It's fine.
Bless it. I feel like that poor man just gets banished to
I know.
corner after corner.
I
And
know.
I would absolutely love to sit down and pick his brain and ask him just how much of that is he really being like forced to do, and how much of it is he like, hell yeah, I want to go to the basement, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like secretly, do you kind of want to do it?
Right, right.
So you kind of answered my question again, which is, do you see progress happening for women in the industry? And I think, talking about the entertainment side of things, there's progress. It's slow moving, I think, but there's progress there. But what do you think about in other areas of the industry? Do you feel like there's still progress happening for women there, or do you feel like it's kind of stalled the way it is in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're kind of in that lull right now with paranormal entertainment, although I do have to give Zach kudos. He's still going
Still
fairly
going.
strong. He's still going, but a lot of paranormal shows got canceled recently.
Yeah.
So, we're in this weird lull now. And I think we're going to have another resurgence in a couple years, and I'm going
Yeah.
to be really interested in seeing like who's part of that resurgence. Now the other thing is the thing that also was a game changer was streaming. Streaming greatly changed the game. Um, we have Katrina and Heather have their YouTube show that's doing pretty well. And
Yeah.
then you also have like, Sam and Colby, and then you have Kalani, you have, all these YouTube streamers who are finding success without the support of a network. Project
Yeah.
Fear is another
Project
one.
Fear.
Um, Actually, I think Project Fear could be an interesting um, starting point for more female inclusivity in the paranormal because, Dakota's sister's already part of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's some potential there. I would like to see more creators, female creators start rising, even if they're not like what I would consider to be a good paranormal researcher. I just want more
Mm.
visibility for women at this
Yes.
point. Um, because they will open the door to people who are more serious, who want to be more serious or more studious about the paranormal, not just
Yeah.
scary thing that moved in the corner. Yeah, so I think we're in an interesting transitional period right now where we could end up with more female diversity now, but I would like to see more visibility with like the female creators. I do wish that some of these larger male creators would be more inclusive in their lineups too.
Yeah.
Um, because I think that can help open the door. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Whether it's at events or on their shows or,
Mhm.
you know, um, Shane Pittman started a streaming network, Beacons,
Yes,
and
Beacon. Yep.
I feel like he's done a great job of that, having that intention of being more diverse and trying to get
Mhm.
more diverse shows out there. And I wonder, and I'd like to talk to him about this, but I wonder how much that is a product of not getting the opportunities. Like there's no one there to take their shows, and is it that, or is it that you're not out searching for them? And I think it's
Mhm.
probably a little bit of both because it's difficult. And the paranormal, yes, there's been a lot of advances and people are more open to it, but I think it still is a little bit taboo and people aren't always out there going, hey, I love the paranormal and I have this great show that I could work with you on, or whatever it may be. And I think that that's a really interesting thing that you're talking about in terms of there's a lull right now, but what's happening in a few years and what
Yeah.
direction are we going next? And, you know, um, you were talking about having, not necessarily the most advanced researchers out there for entertainment purposes, but at least they're opening the door. And I was thinking as you were saying that, I feel like that's kind of what happened with that last wave of paranormal entertainment in the sense of, and my friend Lauren and I have a great joke of this whole thing, but every woman in the paranormal industry at least once you're going to get the question, "Oh, so are you a medium? Are you a
Yep.
psychic?"
Yep.
Because that's really the only women that seem to be shown on TV shows. It's like, "Oh, they're coming on board as a medium or psychic." And don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with mediums and psychics, but just because I'm a woman, that doesn't mean that's what I do. Um, but again, if that's helping to get more visibility, get more diversity, fine, so be it, open the door, but then let the rest of us come in too, you know?
Yep. Yeah, and a lot of these shows like they have their tropes and they have like it's almost like a cookie cutter like insert here for like a cast and yeah, usually it's a
Yeah.
medium, a witch, the sidekick, like the tech person's usually male, the
Yep.
lead investigator's usually a male, historian usually male, but sometimes you can put in a
Sometimes.
woman in there. But yeah, usually the women's always like the witch or the medium
Yep.
or both.
Or both, exactly. So, I only have a couple more questions for you, but I was wondering, and this one is kind of special for me because I definitely, looking back, I had so much interest in the paranormal, but I would have had no idea how to get my foot into this space in any capacity. I wasn't, just like you were saying, you weren't allowed creepy stuff at home. I wasn't either. My mom was very afraid that everything was going to just ruin me for the rest of my life. We weren't allowed to watch The Goonies or E.T. because they were
Oh
too
goodness.
scary. And so I would like sneak Goosebumps books from the library. And um so my question back to that was, what advice would you give to young women who are interested in pursuing the paranormal in any capacity?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Now, as a career, I mean, that's a little tricky because
Mhm.
you know, money that's there I mean, there's not a lot of money to be made in this industry, and a
Yeah.
lot of it is because there's not really money in this. Like, I mean, unless like you're a medium, but I don't know a lot of like professional mediums, true, honestly,
Right.
at least who are only doing this. And Now, to dive into the paranormal, like if they want to start researching and investigating, I always recommend like, hey, if you can find a local group that's doing like events, because I think events are like the safest segue. And then if you
Mm.
find out that you like it, then start checking out some books. I usually tell people to not watch the TV shows. Especially if they've already been watching them and you kind of know the formula already of like
Mm.
what a ghost hunt is. And that's where, working with teams will help broaden that horizon. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting world to step into, and there's so many ways to step in and do it. So
Yeah.
there's so many different ways. But I always say like read books, read books, read books, read books.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's great advice because I think no matter what part of the business or the space in general that you are interested in, there's books out there for you. And there's so much to learn outside of just the TV shows.
Hmm.
I like that you said that because, yeah, it's fun to watch them, sure. But it definitely imprints your brain with this idea of what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like. And I think something that, not it's not a secret, this is widely discussed, but those shows make it look like you go to the haunted location and every 5 minutes something's happening. You're hearing a noise or you're seeing a light. And
Hmm.
from what I understand and from what I've experienced on my own, it's just not how it works. And there's a lot of just sitting around and thinking and listening and, waiting. And I think that people who aren't just watching TV, but they're doing their research, they're reading, they're talking to people, they're going to these events, like you said, it gives them a whole different perspective on things. And it helps, I think, really open their mind, which makes you a better investigator,
Hmm.
really.
Agreed.
So, my last question for you is, what are some things that you would like to see more of in the industry, especially for women?
I would like to see more women headlining events. That's a big one. There's still a blatant disparity of women in paranormal events in the event circuit to the point where I'm like, this almost feels intentional. Like,
Yeah.
um, especially since we've reached this lull in the TV show industry, in the entertainment industry. Um, yeah, I get having para celebrities, but also it's like, okay, so if you have to have a male para celebrity come in, then fill up your roster with female guests.
Yeah,
I've seen way too many paranormal events lately that have literally all men in their rosters, and I'm like, really?
right,
And I when I look at their credentials, I'm like, okay, so they're friends with somebody, or they didn't really achieve that much, or they were on Ghost Adventures for 5 minutes. One of the
right.
most, and I actually come from this from a personal standpoint. I was actually denied a headlining gig at an event for somebody who was on, I think, Ghost Adventures for 5 minutes, and meanwhile, I already been on like 4 TV shows and actually had
Yeah,
a prominent role in those TV shows. And I'm like, okay, interesting. And I ended up
right.
having the longer line at the table when people were wanting to buy stuff and get things signed. Um, and then just in the industry in general, like I just want to see women be in a role that's not the witch, not the psychic, not like the spiritual or the consultant. Like I want them to be an investigator, like an actual hardcore investigator.
Yeah,
Um, I keep going back to Zach, but almost like a female equivalent of Zach, somebody leading it. Doesn't even have to be an all-female cast, but just like somebody leading it and being at the forefront. So, um,
yeah.
yeah, just some more inclusivity. It's 2025. We have so much diversity out there. We have so many brilliant minds out there, and it's a shame we're kind of being denied the chance to see all of them and hear their
Yes,
thoughts.
absolutely. And that's honestly what starting Spooky Sisterhood was all about. It was seeing all these men that were leading shows and leading events. And when you even go to look up books and you look up information, a lot of it's men that come up first. And you have to dig a little. And I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing because you're really bringing a lot of awareness about how many women not only are out there doing the work, but have been for just centuries. And that's really, really great. And I hope that, like you were saying, we can continue to tell their stories.
Hmm.
So I want to say thank you so much for chatting with me today. But before you leave, it's time I ask you, do you, Alex, want to become a member of the secret society of the Spooky Sisterhood?
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay, repeat after me.
Okay. Do I have to lift my hand up or anything, or
Sure.
do the Girl
Whichever
Scout
finger you
salute?
want.
I know. What?
So I, Alex,
I, Alex,
promise to show compassion to the spirits,
promise to show compassion to the spirits,
my community, and myself.
my community, and myself.
Remain open minded and non judgmental.
Remain open-minded and non-judgmental.
Use critical thinking.
Use critical thinking.
Treat people, places, and things with respect.
Treat people, places, and things with respect.
And above all, keep it spooky.
And above all, keep it spooky.
Welcome to the siblinghood, my friend.
Yay! Thank you.
So, can you tell everybody what you've got coming up next and where they can find you?
Yeah, so Women of the Paranormal Volume 2 is going to be coming out either late spring, early summer. Right now, that's the goal. And then I do put on a paranormal conference every year. Well, I say every year. We're getting into year two. So the Paranormal Research Symposium will be coming back for its second year in August, August 23rd in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So, perfect place for a paranormal symposium. That one's a really special event near and dear to my heart. We actually have our speakers submit abstracts before they are considered, meaning they have to write a short summary of their presentation, and then they also write papers for a journal that will be compiled after the symposium. So it's very much a research-based event.
That's so exciting and much needed. I know that that fills a huge space that this industry really needed. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be good. And I mean, I've read all the abstracts of for to be considered for this year's, and it's going to be tough to make some decisions. It's going to be really tough.
Oh boy. You let me
Yeah.
know if you need me to be the bad guy. I'll do it.
Sweet.
All right. Well, as we sign off, just a reminder to check us out on social media. Visit beacons.ai/spooky sisterhood. And from there, you'll find links to our socials, our website, our videos, our guests' info, and so much more. A big thank you to our wonderful Patreon pals. If you'd like to join us for some after the gavel conversation, then you'll have the opportunity to send in questions and you'll get some other awesome perks too. So you have plenty of time to join that. And with that, if there's no more business, this meeting of the Secret Society of the Spooky Sisterhood is adjourned. So as always, keep it spooky, Sibs.